Over-the-top players such as WhatsApp, BlackBerry Messenger, Telegram, and many others have significantly affected the average revenue per user of telecom subscribers, and this has adversely affected the overall revenue of the industry. Questions begging for answers include, where does the industry go from here, having invested in billions of dollars? How would telcos compete with OTT players who have very little investment and overheads? Jane Egerton-Ideh, Country Manager, Avanti Satellite Communications, joins us to share her thoughts on the way forward for the telecommunications industry.
You've been in the telecom industry from the inception. What do you think of the industry today?
I think today we are somehow at an evolution where we are about to enter some new transformational phase. So globally, it's not as optimistic as it used to be because growth is slowing down, revenues are declining, customers are becoming more savvy, more aware, technology is becoming more sophisticated, and that's a good thing. But in terms of the returns for investors and operators, maybe not as it used to be. But the good thing is that it also gives room for growth. It's also at the point where we're about to access a new layer of countries or continents like Africa, places we haven't been to before. Because for a long time, we have just been in the cities and the main towns. But I think now, technology is going all the way down to the rural areas.
So, but Jane, in that case, why would somebody else invest in rural telephony?
Because it's the next phase. That's where the next 1 billion subscribers will come from. And that's where technology hasn't really accessed untapped potential. Because if you look at it today, we're used to giving access or services to people in the city. We have not bothered to look at the needs of those in the rural areas. So yes, we will not get the same outputs or we will not have the same revenues as we got when we were in the cities, but there is an untapped potential in the rural areas.
And would it be the same sort of infrastructure, base stations and switches, or different kind of technology?
Yeah, I think you're really hitting the point. That is where the challenge is. So we cannot use the technology we've used to service the main cities for the rural areas because now the cost model has to be lower. It's just natural to know that you have to come with a lower cost model because you're not going to get the same revenues, but there's still a market there. So yes, the technology in the sense of the base stations or the switches have to be the same, but how can we make them lower? How can we make them cheaper? How can we use lower cost models to access that? So we probably have to rethink the whole, cases. I'll give you an example. Today, when we build sites, we run them on, for most of the West African countries, we run them on generators, isn't it? And that requires diesel or fuel. If we go to the rural areas, can we run those kind of models? Because that's an expensive operational cost. Maybe we should look at solar instead, or other forms of energies that will be cleaner and probably have a lower cost to them.
Yeah, but don't you think investors would rather just stay away than go this route? So
naturally, investors will want to shy away where they don't have high returns. Every investor is natural. You're looking for where you're going to make lots of money. If the business case is right, investors won't shy away. Then also there comes the issue of policy and regulation. If the governments are also involved, I don't think investors will shy away. Investors will shy away because the cost of running the models they run in the city in those rural areas will be very high. When governments come and complement investors, then you can get into those rural areas because also it's beyond just the whole return of revenue. It's also the value we bring, the fact that we bring commercial activity, the fact that that economic growth will affect other forms of industry. We'll be talking about technology affecting other sectors of the industry. And that's where some of these small SMEs we're talking about are. And that's the only way we can give them that growth using technology. So governments will come with the right policies. I'll give you an example. There's a project I ran when I was in Ghana with one of the operators there. And one of the things the government in Ghana did was to help that project by making sure little things like site acquisition are taken up, custom clearance are taken up, because those are costs.
Right of way?
Right of way are taken up. Because they also were interested to make sure that that technology is accessed by the rural areas.
Jane, take us through the Ghanaian project you mentioned, the impact it had on the Ghanaian economy, and also how it played out with the government coming in.
Okay, so that project was run with one of the main operators in Ghana together with the government. So the government has an arm that accesses a fund that has been It's a contribution from all the operators and also part of the government's own contribution called GIFEC. And the idea was to take, like we said, mobile technology to the rural areas. Now the value is immense. So let's say, what happens to an average villager when he has a phone and can access his neighbors, similar communities, or the cities? Different things happen, things like mobile money. So mobile money becomes a payment method. So that financial institution now has access to that area. Remember that today we have banks that are still not reached the rural areas. And the mobile technology has reached areas that even our banking sections have not reached. So with the phone, they have access to mobile money. They can pay for things. They can transfer money. They can receive transfers. And they notice a lot of international transactions also via the mobile money. So that's one good thing when you have data in those areas. And other things start to happen.
Do we have a similar fund in Nigeria? And what should we be doing at this point in time?
I believe we do. It's just that we also have to be interested to make sure that it also works for Nigeria. I know for a while it's been driven mostly by the operators themselves. And I think for it to actually move forward, you need the government involved. Because once the government is involved, like we said, there are parts of the model that becomes easier to run in the rural area. So it's something we have to consciously want to drive, because I think that's what happened in Ghana. So in Nigeria, we can do that. We already have the technology. The models are there. The models are not different. It's just that people have to be creative and innovative in the way they actually implement the model. And the good thing is that things like what my company is doing, Advantage, is to bring satellite. And satellite KA band, if it's a low-cost model, becomes accessible to every rural area. Because now, once you have KA band and you have the hub, like the ground earth station in country, you reduce the latency. So carrying voice traffic becomes easier, as opposed to paying higher to carry traffic and latency to other countries. So yes, we just have to have the willpower to want to do it.
The average revenue per user seems to be dropping, and the telcos are complaining that the OTT players are the reason behind this. What do you think about the situation?
There's lots of school of thought. So we'll talk about, personally, I believe that there is a huge impact from the OTT players, because in reality, there's some forms of their revenue have actually been eroded. Take, for example, roaming. An average user, when they roam these days, what do? You roam with your phone. People put on their Wi-Fi hotspot and use one of the other application service providers to make their voice call, and that's revenue lost. So it's natural that they have been impacted by the OTT players. But what do you do about it? I think is the next thing. They have seriously been impacted. We know that users have become very savvy, because users have become used to having these services for free. People don't pay to use Google or YouTube or use Facebook. You're used to having these services for free, and you're expecting that your mobile operators will start to think like that. But the models they've run for a long time are different, because they have to access their services by buying that infrastructure, the hardware, the software, the spectrum.
And they pay huge licensing fees.
And they pay huge licensing fees. So like any businessman or any investor, they need return on that investment.
Jane, a lot of countries like China have chosen to build certain solutions in-house because they feel that foreign OTT players don't sort of contribute so much to the economy in terms of taxes and employment. In the case of Nigeria, for example, most of these digital companies, when people pay for the adverts, it goes straight to Dublin or San Francisco. What should we be doing?
I think we have to relook at the whole policy and regulation for our country. I think the models we run are a bit outdated for what we see. Like you said, these are companies that most times they don't have a physical presence. They don't have an ecosystem where they create a workforce for us. These are companies that don't even pay tax. They don't have to, because they're not physically present. And we have operators or mobile operators that already have a physical presence. These guys pay tax. They create an ecosystem. They contribute a huge amount to our GDP. So the way we regulate them should slightly be seen in the context of the whole entire industry. And when we do that, then we can start to make sure that when we negotiate, when the government negotiates with, for partnerships with these OTT players, then you start demanding, because you know the value you bring to the table. Rather than being a bit restrictive and trying to, restrict the existing players by using a lot of regulation, how can we evolve that so we get better value from these players that are getting value off our market, but probably not bringing the same returns?
Does it mean regulate them?
Not necessarily regulate them, but we know there's a lot of talk of collaboration. When people ask for these collaborative efforts, what do we ask from them in return? Because we can demand for things like they do have physical presence in country. We can demand that they invest in certain sectors of our industries as a way to give back for the kind of revenues they're making from our country. And those are things we can take at that level. Not necessarily regulate them, but make sure that we use that opportunity to get as much as we can from these OTT players.
Jane, thank you for being on TechTales today.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
My take is that we should treat the telecommunications industry as a critical national asset and create a more enabling environment in the face of borderless competition. That's why we draw the curtain on today's edition of the show. Do follow us on social media, and don't forget, you can watch these and previous editions of the show on the Channels TV YouTube account or via my blog, cfatech.ng. For Tech Trends, and Chukwemeka Agbata.